So I'm afraid we're up on time now for that, and we have to move on to the second speaker. And this is Miss Sabine Walsh. She is head of the Curriculum Innovation and Learning Design for the education technology company Media Academy. And her presentation this evening is using technology to address the skills gap. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabine Walsh and I am co-founder and head of learning at Mediator Academy. And we specialise in teaching dispute resolution skills to law students online. I'm talking to you today from the west of Ireland, as you can possibly see by the background. I thought I would deliver this out here just for a little bit of a change from the various different office spaces that we're all spending a lot of time looking at these days. So to give you a little bit of context and background to this talk, obviously everyone these days is teaching everything online as a result of the pandemic, including skills. But we have been working in this area for some time and looking at how best to teach skills online in order to bring this education that we feel is crucial for the lawyers of the 21st century to students all over the globe who might live in far-flung places such as this and don't have access to the traditional classroom format in which to learn these skills. Why are we talking specifically about dispute resolution skills? Well, number one, the practice of law is changing. Various new regulatory developments and market forces are really underpinning dispute resolution and particularly mediation as a cornerstone of 21st century legal practice. We have things such as the Singapore Convention, a new convention on mediation regulation. Here in Ireland, we have a really far-reaching new Mediation Act, which has changed the dispute resolution landscape significantly in the last couple of years. And other jurisdictions are following suit, including some over there in Asia. In addition to this, and I think this is going to be something actually that is going to be much more pronounced now in the wake, if there ever is one, of the pandemic, is that there are going to be many, many more disputes and fewer resources to resolve these disputes in the traditional way, fewer resources in terms of time and money to fund litigation, and fewer resources in terms of courts and court lists that are already constrained, and now as a result of increased disputes and litigation due to the pandemic and decreased sitting time, decreased numbers of people who can sit in courtrooms, more of these disputes are going to find their way into alternative mechanisms. Alongside all that, we know that, again, even before recent circumstances, the way university teaching is happening has been changing. More and more students are looking for online teaching and online options. We know that from our own research that students are increasingly keen to learn online, be it because they can't travel to the college they'd really like to attend, or because they're also working and have other commitments and want to learn in their own time. So the question that we've been grappling with then really is whether and how you can teach skills online, because there is a presumption that you can only teach skills, particularly interpersonal skills like communication and mediation, in a classroom, in a face-to-face setting, in small groups, and using role play. And we decided quite early on that we really wanted to challenge this assumption and think a little bit more broadly about how you can teach skills. Now, we did a lot of research into that and a lot of discussions with students and with universities, and we did a lot of pedagogical research. And we've kind of come up with a formula for doing this, but at the heart of this formula is video. And that's really what I want to focus on in this short presentation today. So we started off quite a few years ago really thinking that in order for people to learn properly how to practice these kind of skills that really they needed to learn from people who were practicing this. Okay, I remember when I trained as a mediator, I had a sort of a shocking revelation a few years later that the person who had trained me, who was an excellent trainer, had never actually mediated a case, was just a trainer. And I remember being very kind of taken aback by that and thinking, sure, how can somebody teach me about this if they're not actually practicing it on a day-to-day basis? So my co-founder Ala Davis began interviewing the best of the best in the world of dispute resolution practice, initially on video Skype interviews, and then in a more natural setting, the face-to-face setting, to really dig into their practice and how they do what they do so well. So over the years, we as we learned and developed, we moved from sort of long form videos, video Skype interviews, to shorter 2 to 4 minute videos with various different features, to then videos that are integrated in a whole system of pedagogically designed activities and experiences. We found that really video was the key to all this for a number of different reasons, and one of the features we have in our videos is that we use simulations, so skills simulations of mediations, client consultations, that sort of thing. And if you want to know a little bit more about the background and the pedagogical framework we use for this, I've spoken a little bit about that in a blog that I've sent on to be posted, and we also have some papers that were published which I can make available. But really what we discovered was, particularly when researching teaching skills online, a lot of the research comes from the world of nursing and other medical practices. And we found that really there was an enormous value for students in being able to watch the skills that they then need to practice. And this has already been established in the medical field, where nursing students particularly often take online courses and watch procedures and simulations over and over again. And we began to think, surely this is a better way of learning a skill than being put into a chair in a role play situation with your peers with relatively little preparation and all the anxiety that goes with that, and then being told, now deliver an opening statement, reframe what the client has just said, summarize what the other party's position is. In the medical world, they talk about this process in terms of watch it, do it, teach it. So first you watch the skill, then you do the skill, and then you teach and tell someone else, like for example your peers, how to do it. So this is a bit of a version of that. We found then, as we began to develop and deliver these simulations, that students reported back to us that they really particularly liked them because they reduced their anxiety before they had to go out and deliver a skill themselves. So they actually saw what it looked like, and watching it a few times gave them the confidence to do this. And then they also had the added benefit then of seeing the videos of the faculty members then talking about the skills in the simulation and how they might practice them, how they might do things a little bit differently. And in that process, modelled reflective practice actually, and the integration of theory and practice. So since this is an academic conference and we want to talk a little bit about the pedagogy under this, and there are lots of different frameworks we can talk about, but really one that we found very useful in thinking about this is what's known as the RAT, or the RAT framework, which was developed by Hughes in 2008. And as I said, the blog provides all references for anything I mention here. And he has looked at the whole idea of using technology for education as falling into a framework of replacement, amplification, or transformation. So what he means by this is that depending on which of those paradigms you're in, it informs how you use and deploy the technology, and then obviously that in turn then informs the outcomes and the benefits that the students get from it. And really, when you're talking about this framework, as you can see it there on the slide, we're talking about, I suppose, an evolution, if you like, in the sophistication of how you use technology. And I think it's best if I just talk you through an example of this. So when we're talking about replacement, really what we think about is the replicating something that already exists. Okay, so we all know this. We've all had to do a lot of replacement in the last few months, where we've had to replace our face-to-face sessions online. The most obvious way to do that is live streaming lectures or lecture capture, and making those lectures available to students afterwards. And that's good and that's great, but it comes with certain limitations, not least the fact that it's a very one-dimensional type of online teaching. It's very didactic, long lectures particularly. A lot of students, particularly students who are understandably stressed, find it difficult to maintain their engagement. And there's always a little bit of a risk of kind of switching off and becoming disengaged. Amplification then is the next level up, and you can see from the little example there, that's just an example of a technology enhanced simulation or basically demonstration videos, something like that, something like you find on YouTube quite a lot. These are great, but again, in the absence of being intentionally designed for learning and to attain particular learning outcomes, they can just not quite fit, if you like. And sometimes like this, I mean, there's a lot of technology out there now in relation to, you know, animation. I know somebody I saw online was building a law school in Minecraft the other day, but that using technology for technology's sake can also risk overloading the student. Really what we're aiming for is this idea of transformation, where the technology that we're using, in this case video, is being used to create learning experiences that maybe wouldn't otherwise be available. So for example, being able to sit in on a mediation session, to be able to sit in the mediator's chair, in the party's chair, in the lawyer's chair, and then, as is an example here, to listen to a practitioner then comment on how the mediator performed in that instance, to ask questions around what might they have done differently, how else might this have worked out, and so on and so forth. And the key to that, of course, is intentional use. So the framework that we built in brief is one particularly founded on constructive alignment. So the videos are designed, both the simulations and the expert interviews, with very specific learning outcomes in mind, so that the student is being led to a destination and being asked to construct the learning through their engagement with the video. We use acknowledged industry experts, who I think some of you might have seen a clip or two of in this short introductory video. It's always good to bring in a little bit of Hollywood and make sure that these videos are really professionally produced. No students like amateur home videos. And of course that you implement best practice in terms of universal design for learning, in terms of including captions, in terms of how the videos are segmented and presented, etc. In brief, what our students have thought about this is they love them. We found that, particularly looking at the analytics, in the weeks leading up to a skills assessment, students would watch and rewatch videos. And that shows that they were looking at them for learning, they were modeling their skills on them, going off practicing them, watching them again. And that they found it was just really, really engaging, and we got a lot of feedback on that. What we learned was that obviously teaching online can't achieve everything, and sooner or later those students, particularly who want to be mediators or who want to be dispute resolution lawyers, will have to get out there and practice their craft. But we know for a fact that the students felt that having the opportunity to see the skills modelled, to engage in, for example, branching activities where they get to decide what happens next and what the mediator should say next and what the outcome of that is. And seeing a bit of critical analysis and reflection on these videos really helped them develop their skills, gave them the confidence to go out and practice in the real world and with their peers, and generally made for a really engaging and interesting online experience. So that's just a tiny little snapshot of one aspect of what we've learned about how to teach skills online. I'm available for questions now, obviously, and my contact details are shared. And thank you very much for listening and putting up with a bit of West of Ireland wind in the background. Bye-bye.
Thank you. There is a couple of questions here for you. The first question is from Grace. Do you think some kinds of uniform rules have to be adopted by users?
I'm not quite sure what she means by uniform rules. Maybe she could clarify the question a little bit in terms of users of video or the students. I'm not entirely sure what she means by that. Maybe we could just skip forward to another question. I can come back to that.
Yeah. If anybody's got any other questions, could you please forward them via the chat, please? There is another message from Grace Ip, and she is saying that virtual hearings for core hearings and e-platform for arbitration are flourishing in the UK and in Asia. For instance, EBRAM and HKIAC in Hong Kong.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so that's, and absolutely, if you're using video to actually conduct procedures, yes, absolutely, there have to be rules and regulations. And while we also look at teaching people how to use these skills online and teach them online how to use the skills online, what we're primarily focused on is teaching people using online learning how to use those skills in reality. So the intention is not just to deploy these skills in the online environment, but actually in the live face-to-face environment as well. But yes, absolutely. I think as ODR develops, and as you say, online arbitration, online courts, a system of unified rules is definitely going to have to be drafted. I don't know who's going to take over that task. I know in Ireland here, our courts have gone online in the last few months, and in fairness, our judges who've been kind of embedded in a 700-year-old way of doing things have been extremely responsive. But yes, that's going to be the next step in regulation of those kind of processes, definitely.
Okay, thank you. So has anybody got any questions? Or Grace, could you possibly elaborate on your message regarding, or your question regarding about uniform rules having to be adopted by users?
Sorry, does she want me to elaborate, or?
She asked the question, but I'm not quite sure what she actually means. So perhaps if she can get back to us. If anybody else has any questions, could you please send them to the chat box?
Yeah, got about 3 minutes or whatever. Your timekeeping is extremely impressive, I have to say. I've never met such a superbly organised conference. I think I'm getting a message through here now on the chat. This is an interesting question. So this is somebody from the Faculty of Law in Hong Kong. And do we depend on volunteer practitioners to assist you? No, we don't. We pay for people to do that. I mean, one of our kind of overriding goals here is to provide really lifelike simulations and really real scenarios. And I don't know, for anyone who's been involved in sort of training role plays and that can be difficult to achieve with people who aren't practicing in that space. So we use actors as the parties in our scenarios, and the people who play the practitioners are practicing practitioners, because we want to show students how the expert do it, really. In terms of how we deliver the case scenarios, this is my favorite thing to do, but so we deliver them by reference to the desired learning outcomes. That is really where we start. So we think about what do we want the students to be able to do when they have completed engagement with this simulation. And then we work back from there. What we do is sometimes use cases that have maybe been through, I know in one simulation we used a case that had been through the Irish courts here in relation to mediation. And so that gave us a framework and also allowed us the opportunity then to inject a bit of realism into it and tell the parties what really happened in the end. So that's basically what we do. We base it loosely sometimes on scenarios that have taken place. And of course, myself and my colleagues have all practiced as mediators as well and as lawyers. So we sometimes use those, and then we adjust the fact patterns then depending, again, the core outcome is what do we want the students to be able to do after they've engaged with this. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Thank you. I have a question here from Professor Lower. Do the nursing videos focus on very mechanical skills or deal with things like bedside manner or more complicated processes? And is there a limit to what can be done with video?
Well, I suppose what we're trying to do is push those limits in terms of what can be done with video. I think there is a heuristic or an idea that there is a limit about what you can do. We're trying to push that. In terms of nursing videos, what's interesting is, so training videos for doctors tend to focus very much on the mechanical. But training videos and role play simulations for nurses and also other care staff do focus a lot more on the bedside skills as well. And one reason for that is, for example, when nurses are learning on the job, if you like, when they are in hospitals, they might be in a group of 12 nursing students crowded around a bed, and they can't hear or see what's actually going on, what's being demonstrated to them, both in terms of practical skills and interpersonal skills. So simulations offer them more actually than the bedside experience, where they're, trying to see over other people and hear what the nurse is saying. And it's having been a patient, where a bunch of nursing student comes around to examine you, it's not an entirely pleasant experience. So what we like to think is that, if video is used correctly, can actually overcome the limits that some face-to-face sessions might have.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. How do you integrate your simulations and content into existing courses?
So a number of different ways. We have a couple of sort of standalone courses that universities subscribe to, but the way our content is structured is the simulations come with, they're integrated into a lesson, if you like. They come with interactions, they come with resources, and they can then by the university be integrated into their module, into their curriculum. Our modules are mapped against the, it's the European Framework of Qualifications here. I presume you have an equivalent over there, so that you can see, if you're designing your curriculum, you can see how much of the curriculum the modules that you're subscribing to from us can take. But they all come with integrated assessment and learning activities as well.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left for any questions, if anybody would like to put them forward through the group chat. We just have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Anybody's got any questions?
The weather's not quite so nice today, so I've had to defer back to the office.
There's another question here. Is it just mediation you cover?
No, we're kind of, I suppose we're focused on what can broadly come into the bucket of sort of 21st century skills. So we also look at technology, negotiation, arbitration, ADR generally. mainly focused on law students and equipping laws. I mean, really, I suppose our mission is to equip law students with the skills they're going to need to practice in the future. You know, as a lot of transactional work and that is taken over by technology, it's those interpersonal, those human skills that can't be replaced by technology, and that clients are increasingly looking for, and regulators are pushing. So it extends out beyond mediation. Yeah, that's the short answer.
Okay, thank you.